this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee of the San Lorenzo Valley Water District. Would you take the roll, Holly?
Yes, Gail Mayhood,
Here.
Jeff Hill,
Yes.
Jim Bond,
Here.
Sky Herrick.
Here.
Okay, are there any changes to additions or installations from the agenda?
No.
Okay, with that then, it is time for oral communications from the public on items that are not on the agenda. Mr. Holloway?
Hi, I'm Bruce Holloway from Boulder Creek. I may have brought this up last meeting, but I think it's worth bringing up over and over again. That's the connection fee. The connection fee for a new house that wants to get added to SLBWD, I believe is $10,577. And that was determined in 2017. Around the same time as the 2017 water rate study. And there's been so much investment in infrastructure in the last 7 years. If you read the report back in 2017, I think they described two methods to come up with a connection fee, but one of them has to do with how much infrastructure there is on the books. So I think a lot has been added in the last 7 years, and that figure needs to be increased. And I'm guessing something between something like 12,500 or 13,000 is probably the right amount. One reason I think this would be important to take a look at is Big Basin Water Company. I mean, whatever the connection charge is for one house, I think that's the starting point for negotiations over there. So if it's 10,500 like it is now, that adds up to $5.25 million. And if it went up to 13,000, that would be $6.5 million. And Rick Rogers said he thought there needed to be $40 million worth of investment in order to integrate Big Basin into our district. So there's a big difference there, but I think it would be good to raise that bottom end a little bit. So please take a look at the connection fee at some point.
Perhaps Brian, you could bring that back as an agenda item sometime later in the year at your convenience to look into that.
Yeah, it's something to look into, definitely. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. It's noted.
All right. Okay, so we go on to new business. The first item is project funding reallocation. Brian, are you going to do this or?
So we're going to have Heather's going to present for us. Thank you.
Hi, Heather. Welcome.
Good afternoon, committee. The report before you is related to proposed project funding. The first project is the Glen Arbor Bridge Pipeline Project. Construction for this project was completed last fiscal year, yet the finances were never closed out, and there is about $147,000 due to the contractors. There is no current year budget appropriated for this project. Staff is proposing to transfer remaining budget from the completed and closed out Quail Hollow project to the Glen Arbor project. Both have the same funding source, which is reserves. The second project is the Harmon Street project. The current year budget for this project is $580,000, funded with the $15 million debt proceeds. Engineer's estimate is coming in at about $1 million. If we add an additional 30% above the construction costs to cover expenses for specialized consultants, we need total budget of about $1.3 million. There are two budgeted projects, Bennett Spring pipeline damage and Eckley pump station, which are also proposed to be funded with $15 million debt proceeds. And while these are important projects, they are moving slower than anticipated. Staff is proposing to transfer a portion of budget from each of those two projects to the Harmon Street project so that this project can continue to move forward. The remaining budget will allow design to who completed for each of the two projects, Bennett Spring and Eckley Pump. And Garrett Ruth is here. He's the district's engineering manager. Present any questions about the project. But that concludes my report.
Thank you, Heather. That was pretty clear. Garrett, did you want to add anything to this?
No, I'm here to answer any questions.
That's okay, thank you for coming. Jeff, did you have any questions?
Okay, so I have perhaps a comment more than a question, but I guess it's a question too. We seem to have all of the engineering projects we've looked at recently seem to have a fair number of change orders and things like that. And, these are no different. There are change orders. We spent a lot of money on engineering consultants and stuff like that. I would like staff to take a look at whether or not adding an additional engineer to the staff would give us a chance to be more thorough in looking at these projects in the beginning and save us money on change orders and other miscellaneous costs like that. And perhaps also, we've got a whole lot of money tied up in consulting work with Sandus and others. And if we could add an engineer to staff, we might save a whole bunch of money. I haven't, analyzed that or anything, but I'd like the staff to take a look at it.
I agree. That sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
We have looked at staff also just from the standpoint of workload. We haven't finished an analysis of that, but it's noted that if we asked, I think I mentioned that in the compensation study, we wanted to look at an associate engineer position, which isn't in our books right now or isn't in the budget, but just look at that as another, so that we have a range where we could fill the positions too.
Yeah.
So noted. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm at Jim Bond. I've got a question related to that. So I don't have any experience in construction, but in computer and software development, change orders were the rule of the day. I never remember anything happening without change orders. So my question is, do we have a feel for whether or not our change order expenses and process is out of bounds or normal for construction business?
I know we push back, and I encourage that we push back when we don't think it's right. But sometimes it isn't inevitable. It's just conditions unfold in a certain way. You have line item costs, and then you negotiate. If you have to add a hydrant or move something or conditions change, and that's something I think it is normal. But yeah, when is it out of bounds and when isn't it? It's hard to say, other than I know we take it case by case, and if we think it's not correct, we're certainly not going to back down from pushing back on cost. In the consulting side, I think part of it is also having competition. It's just trying to keep, maybe introduce new consultants in the mix so that you always have that all the consultants sort of take note that there's some competition there. But yes, it's as long as I've been in government, it's been there, but and I know, like I said, we try to push back when we can. So
It sort of brings up another thing about budgeting is maybe we should be assuming that there's going to be an amount like 20%. It totally makes sense given that the age of our system, sometimes we don't know where things are, and it's not, it's nobody's mistake. It just is the reality of the situation. So it doesn't surprise me that we have these kinds of problems, but for budgeting purposes, maybe we ought to have a larger reserve
Contingency
on there so that you don't have to keep coming back for every single one, as long as we're convinced you're doing as Brian says, that you're pushing back on these. Scott?
It's true. I mean, some of them are things like we end up doing a lot of paving, which I'm, another discussion for another day. But
Yeah.
It's certainly none of this goes by me without thinking, just at least turning on what the solution is and how to be smart. I mean, the other one is trying to be smart with how you spend the money in the first place. And focusing on projects is one way, being efficient by just making sure that I think a lot of times when projects lose momentum, they end up costing more. So I have kind of encouraged that we stay focused and we do the jobs that are in front of us and try to work through those as quickly as possible. So, and there was a staff change. I mean, unfortunately with Josh parting is that we had a period where there was a lot of work that just, we didn't have any background or overlap or anything. So Garrett came in and picked up the pieces as best as he could. So hopefully, I mean, that is one wave of it, is I encourage that we're cleaning up as we're going forward. And so you probably will just see a lot of that until it's all done. We're back on top of seeing that, we're not missing deadlines on amending contracts, et cetera, and so forth.
Sky?
Yeah, so I guess the question I have is on Harmon Street. About like, did the scope of the work change? Because the cost is like 125% of what the original budget line item is, which I understand the 30% for specialists, which I think goes to the point about maybe those are things long-term that we could hire someone from, but they're just wondering about the base price basically doubled over what was budgeted. So the scope change, or was it just like pricing of materials is different from when it was, or what's driving that?
Yeah, so typically when we make these budgets, it's a 2-year look ahead, and you do your best to put a round number. So the 580,000 was a nice round number. Once the design is complete, then they go through it item by item and make a list of the engineer's estimate. So that is every hydrant, every foot of pipe, the extents of the paving, striping if we're gonna have to repaint the roads. And so there's a lot more detail put into the engineer's estimate. And even with that, that's not the final bid. So once we go out to bid for construction, we'll get real prices, which could be less than the engineer's estimate. It could be greater than the engineer's estimate. And that's the actual price that the district will pay for the work.
So if I could add a comment to that, I personally would rather see higher initial estimates and come in under than have to, at every board meeting, be approving a lengthy list of change orders with additions and things like that. So I think in budgeting, particularly when we're looking at the very early estimate, the round number estimate, I'd much rather see us come in on the high side there and then find out that it's going to cost us less as we get into it.
Agreed.
So that's my own personal recommendation for engineering.
Right.
Right?
Well, we don't always know. I mean, that is the one thing. And as Garrett said, once you get to the end of it, you actually do an engineer's estimate. Now you're counting the sticks and stones rather than, and so you are going to get a more detailed estimate. But also, just to zoom out a little bit, because this is something that I'm used to doing, and you may see this again, is because we have certain money that we want to spend down. And so I started with this is when we needed money for one project, as I said, well, let's look at the projects where we're not going to spend the money or where there's money sitting out there, and let's just do a true up. That's why we're in this committee.
Yeah.
Is because, yes, in this case, I mean, Harmon Street, it's not a change order. It's just that now we know what the estimate is. We have a better idea what the estimate is. And so we want to be able to reallocate funds and move money around, because we're not asking, typically, my experience is you've already got money budgeted, you have a total amount budgeted, but to redistribute your funds. And to do that periodically so that you're spending down the funds that you want to spend down and keeping projects moving that you could keep moving. Just having the funding.
That makes sense to me.
Any other comment?
No?
I forgot to ask Scott, do we have anybody online?
We do not.
We do not, okay. Is there any comment from the public on this
Well,
item?
before that, are we still talking, I didn't realize we were going to talk about Harmon also.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
So,
Let me finish with your question.
sure. So, when I looked at that, I looked at what seems to be a big number for the consulting, and I said, gee, I wonder what labor compliance is, and that made me very suspicious. Then I realized I don't know what construction testing and activities and oversight by the engineer of record is either. So could somebody explain what those three items are
That'll be my
that
pleasure.
we're going to spend 300,000 on?
So the labor compliance is through the Department of Industrial Relations. And so what they do is they set the rates for carpenters, they set the rates for operators of machinery, or if you're a pipe fitter, or if you're an iron worker. So there's a prevailing wage that you have to pay minimum. You can pay your guys more than that, but you can't pay less on public construction projects. So part of the progress payments, when we make them to the contractor, they have to submit paperwork saying that certified payroll, and there's other rules too for having apprentices on the job. And so we typically hire a consultant that specializes in labor compliance to make sure that the contractor is in compliance with DIR.
Okay, I think I understand that. Just let me, one follow-up just on that.
Sure.
So this is pretty normal for our projects.
Oh, yes.
Got it.
Yes. And so as far as the engineer of record, so they make a set of plans and then they make a book of specifications. And so included in that are requirements for submittals, and there's a form for request for information. So if once the contractor wins the bid, they're going to go to a manufacturer that makes pipe, and they're going to get submittal documents for the pressure class, the diameter, the lining on the inside of the pipe, the coating on the outside of the pipe, everything that meets the specification required by the bid documents. They submit that gets reviewed by engineer of record, and if they make a mistake on the submittal, we can catch it there before they order the pipe. Request for information might be the plan show location of a hydrant. They get out in the field, the contractor is responsible for the layout. So they'll locate the existing pipes, they'll locate the gas lines, they'll locate storm drains, and then they lay out the pipe. Maybe the hydrant isn't in a very advantageous spot and maybe they can move it. They'll submit an RFI if they have any questions and requests for information, and the engineer of record will respond back. There might be a reason that they wanted a particular spot, or it's fine that they go ahead and relocate it. So requests for information are typical. Once we get started with the construction, we'll have weekly progress meetings. Typically, the engineer of record participates in that. Once we're at the end of the project, they'll make a site visit for a final punch list of outstanding items, anything that's not in conformance with their design intent. Once they accomplish everything on the punch list, the project's complete. The engineer of record will write a letter indicating that the construction is in conformance with the design.
They're a third party, right? The engineer of record is a non-SLVWD employee.
Correct. It's the consultant we hire for the design. They stamp and sign the plans. So legally, they are the person responsible for the design.
And I presume if we design the project, then it's your signature on the plans.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I would add, this also kind of goes to what Director Hill, you'd mentioned earlier about good budgeting, is often people forget what we call them soft costs. It's forgetting that to get some, you've already got it designed, you think, okay, I'm done with engineering, actually engineering support during construction that Garrett mentioned, but then there's also construction management if you decide, and then the labor compliance, contingencies, all of that stuff. Typically it's 25-30%. And a lot of times forgetting those is, yeah, you've just left out a big chunk of your budget and you're not budgeting accurately. You're not, like Jeff says, you're missing the mark. And this is us saying, yeah, we're taking into account all these costs that we think we're going to need up front, so that when we move the money, we're not, hopefully not coming back and asking to move more money.
And how long is it expected, is the Harmon Street project expected to be started and completed this year, or is it a multi-year project?
I believe the bid documents indicate 180 calendar days
Mhm.
to be complete with the construction. And that starts once we issue the notice to proceed. This is in close proximity to Boulder Creek Elementary.
Right.
So we want to get it done before school starts, in my mind.
Cool.
Any other questions from Mr. Holloway?
Thanks. There's a couple of words that are being used here that I might be confused about, and I want to get a little more clear. The Quail Hollow project, it says here, so the first word is budget. That's the first word I'm confused about. And the second word is reserves. So in terms of budget, I guess what my confusion is, I usually think of a budget as an annual budget. There's an annual budget for fiscal 24, and the Quail Hollow project refers to that. But there's a second meaning of budget. When I look over at the Harmon Street project, it says the current budget is blah. That's a project budget, as I understand it. That's not an annual budget. So I guess at the time the $15 million was borrowed, there was a list of projects that added up to filled the whole $15 million. So that's one kind of budget, is just that project list that goes back 4 years or 3, at least more than 3 years. And then this other kind of budget is your annual budget. So when you use those words, I guess it would help me to be clear about what kind of budget are you talking about. The second thing is reserves. I did hear in the discussion, I guess when the interim finance director was speaking, she said certain money is coming from reserves. And I remember a finance committee meeting about 6 months ago when the way the discussion went, it was kind of like, let's borrow $19 million so we have reserves. Well, I don't really believe in borrowing reserves. I mean, that's not what I think of as reserves. What I think of as reserves are unrestricted general fund money that can be spent for anything. And so I want to understand going forward that that's what we mean by reserves. We don't mean we borrow $15 million and we call it reserves. So that's kind of where my confusion is. The other thing I want to say is I sure hope this district doesn't borrow a bunch of money in the future and take more than 3 years to spend it. When I noticed that was happening in 2022, because the 2019 loan had not nearly been spent, and it had been more than 3 years, the first thing that occurred to me is a school district would never do this. And I've talked to 3 different school districts, Cabrillo College. I talked to the bond council there one time. I talked to the facilities director at SLD School District. I talked to the board president.
Mr. Holloway, you're kind of going off topic here. This is really not about this agenda item. So I
Well,
think,
you know what, I think that
please finish your comment.
I think that your discussion about whether you need to hire engineers also should have been a separate item. I think you may have gone off topic discussing whether or not to hire an associate engineer. But I am trying to make the point. I think it is wrong for this district to borrow huge amounts of money and take more than 3 years to spend it. And I don't ever want to see it in the future. And I'm trying to explain as best as I can, and I've been trying to explain since 2022, that other districts do not do this. Private developers do not borrow money and take 5 years to spend it either. So I
Thank
think
you.
you take it seriously and not try to cut me off.
Any other comments on this agenda item by members of the board?
No.
Okay, then let's go on to the next item of business, which is to revisit the date of,
Actually, we are looking for a.
I think we need a vote on this.
oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
like that you
And,
recommended to
would
the.
somebody like to read the motion? I don't have it in front of me.
Find it here.
Yes, would you please, Ollie?
The Budget and Finance Committee recommends to the Board of Directors to approve the changes to project funding as proposed to the as proposed in the staff menu. I'll try to read it.
Okay, so moved as read by Ms. Hasek.
And I second.
You need to call for the vote, right?
Well, yes, go ahead.
Gail Mayhood,
Aye.
Jeff Hill,
Yes.
Jim Bond,
Yes.
Sky Herrick.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay. Can we go on to the next item to revisit the date of the Budget and Finance Committee meeting? Who's gonna talk about this?
I don't know, Holly, did you have anything you wanted to say on it?
Well, this was recommended that we revisit it because of the change in the monthly meeting. Instead of being twice a month, and there would be one next week. Yeah, next week, then it was maybe advantageous to move it to another date to be closer to when the board meeting would be happening. So that was the reason for bringing this up.
Yeah, I think it was also, at least when I suggested it, was to give enough time after a board meeting to respond, the staff to respond, to bring something to Budget and Finance, but also enough time before the next meeting. So to have it scheduled right now, what we're scheduled the first week or the second week, is to move it 1 week later would probably make it more functional. Yes.
The only problem that we're running into now with that situation is that we currently have the engineering and environmental committee and the admin committee the following week.
Okay.
They're both in that week. So that is also.
Is it easier for staff to combine them or have them separate?
Combine the meetings,
Not combine the committees, but have them the same week, so it's just like,
well, 3 meetings in a week, that's a lot, and we have 3 meetings this next week, because we moved to board meeting. Or staff's feeling is it's fine where it is, because it's plenty ahead of. Something now could go on the next board meeting,
Mhm.
it's good time to bring it up, because the only other option is to put it on the 3rd week, and I think it's fine where it is.
Mhm.
Because like I said, we're doubling up, and I even considered whether we want to spread those out or not, but for here and now, we'll leave 2 of them on the same week
Mhm.
and see how that goes, because one's less weighty than the other, so hopefully,
Mhm.
so.
Well, I think we should do what staff
Wants.
prefers on this. So if you're happy leaving it where it is, then
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to play it out, but I think we're fine for now, just to.
Mhm.
okay.
I'm fine with that.
Any, Sky,
is it possible to move it up an hour?
change the
Same,
time?
on the same day?
To an earlier time,
Yeah, just up an hour.
would anybody be interested in moving it to 1 o'clock rather than 2?
Work a lot better for my schedule, but I'm being selfish. But the point is already here, so.
That would require me to do some rescheduling at home.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
start running into noon hour traffic and lunch
Yep.
meetings and things that sometimes the staff might have. So
Yeah.
I think
That's fine.
2 is a good time,
Mhm.
I think.
2 works for me.
Okay, so we won't do anything.
Okay.
Well, actually, Mr. Holloway, do you have a comment about this?
No.
Okay. All right. There is no unfinished business. So with that, Is this your last meeting with budget and finance because you're retiring?
Oh,
So I want to
congratulations.
give our,
So that's why I wasn't saying anything about what I heard.
so I want to give
Because it doesn't really matter what I want anymore.
our,
Yeah, so.
all the members the opportunity to thank you for your
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
sure, my pleasure.
been great.
I've enjoyed working with all of you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
wishing you a happy retirement.
Yes, I will be traveling the world.
Take lots of trips.
Pardon?
Take lots of trips.
Oh, yeah. While I still can.
Yes, yes.
Okay, then without objection, I'll adjourn this meeting.
That's fast.
Short and sweet.
Yeah,
Thank
wow.
you.
Be the quickest meeting we've had.
Come to another one if you